Hey everyone, welcome to the program WRSA Radio. I am your host, Grenadier One. As always, I hope you're having a good week. Today is it's kind of a tough one for me. It's my last day on the job at the company that I've been with for 20 years. As I mentioned many episodes back, I was facing some issues at work. There was a restructuring of the department that my team and I were in, and my team was outsourced, and my role was made redundant. I don't really care to get into more details about that. I've made my peace with it, and I just want to move on to something new at this point. And I covered some of my frustrations with it when it first happened. Back many episodes ago, but like I said, I'm ready to move on. I've gone back to school to take some classes and get a refresh on my skill set. As much as I would like to vent and go off about how this has impacted me, it's not going to change anything. So like I said, I've reached a comfort with it, and I just wanted to move on. Just want to move on to something new. But it still is a little bit of a bitterness, and it puts a kind of a dark cloud over the day. But at any rate, when I do get something new, I'll update you all as it might impact my ability to post a show on Friday. I've had the luxury of being able to record the show on Thursday evening and post it on Fridays. Fridays just traditionally had been very light days, and I could take a little bit of time away from my work and post everything and whatnot. And not that it didn't take very long. It was 15, 20 minutes, something like that, usually, to get that kind of stuff going. But that may change. I may have to alter that schedule, but we'll see how it all plays out. For now, things will go on as normal. I will say that next Friday I will have a show, but the week following I will not be able to post anything. I'm going to be at a family event, kind of away from the house for a little while, and I will miss my time window to post. So I'm not going to be able to get a show that following week. So I'll just take that as an opportunity to take a break for a week. But anyway, let's get on to the topic for this episode, for this week. I want to focus this week on the war on free speech. Again, this may seem like we just keep hammering this, but guys, this is vital. I can't stress this enough, and in my opinion, we can't talk about this enough. It's just that important. From the things that we've covered in the UK, and to the things today, the episodes that we've had here recently, I just can't stress this enough, and we just can't talk about this enough. It's just that important, and the actions just keep on happening. Events and attacks on the right to speech just keep taking place. There's a saying kind of going around that says, never in history are the people who are censoring speech the good guys. Now, that's somewhat debatable. There have been things that didn't need to see the light of day, but generally that's more to do with state security, national security, than it is really with an attack on free speech. I think there's some gray area there about what is obscene and is that free speech? That's a debate. Plenty of people that come down on the side of no, that obscenity is not free speech and it should be regulated or suppressed. Again, I don't know where you come down on that, but I think you get the idea here. We're not necessarily talking about that. Political speech is what we're talking about. Just being in opposition to the current government. That's what we're concerned with here. That and things like health information or things that your government might be doing in secret that you're trying to get out. These are the two areas that are the really multiple areas that have been the focus of the most aggressive government censorship over the last few years. we have to stop this. We know the tricks they're using. They're trying to pressure and force big tech to do the work for them, and then pretend like, oh, that's somehow making it legal and acceptable. It's legal for a private company to do these things since it's not the government doing it. It's not a violation of people's rights. You're voluntarily using that platform. We've talked about that before on the show, and we know that's all BS. It's the government using legal force to coerce big tech to act is just an extension of the government, and it's just as egregious of a violation. We saw this week Mark Zuckerberg admit publicly that the Biden administration was demanding censorship of targeted posters. They were intimidating and threatening Meta with revoking their legal protections from being responsible for the content that posters put on Facebook and their other platforms. This is exactly what we're seeing France do with Telegram this week, which we'll get to shortly. So Meta bends the knee and complies with what the government was telling them to do. That's easily seen as the coward's way out, but we can see from internal emails that came out that there was a little bit of pushback from Meta, specifically when the government was targeting RFK Jr. Meta went back to the government and said, hey guys, this guy's not breaking any of our policies and terms. We don't really have any reason to suspend him. And there was some back and forth, and then Meta caved and suspended RFK's account. It's hard to look at this as any other thing than mob tactics on the part of the Biden administration. Even though Meta is Biden friendly and willing to do the bidding after some token pushback, they're really in a tight spot there. The best route to take would have been to go public and expose that entire operation. Force the Biden admin to deal with the fallout of it and lawyer up and demand that the admin take them to court. If you want to revoke our protections, fine, we'll fight you in court over that. We're not doing this. That's the route that you should have took. But they didn't do that, of course. They went along with it, much to their shame. Now let's get to Telegram. I mentioned them earlier there. France this week arrests the CEO of Telegram after luring him into the country, reportedly to meet with President Macron. Not quite sure if that's an accurate story that kind of was floating around, that Macron had kind of invited him to come and have a meeting, and so he was flying in. There's other stories that say no, it was just a fuel stop that the plane was taking. But supposedly the warrants for his arrest were issued when the French knew that his private plane was in the air and en route to France. So there was no warning, there was no contact with the lawyers, there was none of that. It was an ambush. And that tells you that this was all about the public display of power. The prosecutors in France wanted everyone to see what they can do to a billionaire. And this goes back to what I've said in the past, that money doesn't rule the world. People think money rules the world. Oh, the people with the money. No. Physical violence and the threat of it is what rules the world. The legal application of force, that's the key right there. The thin layer of legitimacy over that application of force, that's what rules the world. Here we have a billionaire. All his money could not buy him freedom and escape from this arrest. His money has bought him release under the condition that he not leave France and that he report in to police twice a week. So he's on probation or parole. But he's still in effect a prisoner. Now his best course of action would be to sneak down to the coast and get on a boat and get out of the country. Go back to the United Arab Emirates where he's a resident. He has a French passport. He's dual citizenship with Russia and France. But he lives most of his time in the UAE. Just sneak out, let the lawyers handle it from there. He's got friends in the government, a prince in the United Arab Emirates, they're not likely to extradite him. In fact, they put a stop to a contract where they were going to purchase several dozen fighter jets from the French, and they said, "Well, as long as you got our guy, we're not going to do that." So they're not likely to extradite him. And he could also simply just go to the embassy in the UAE, well, for the UAE in Paris, and kind of take the route of Julian Assange. So why is France having such a rage boner for the CEO of Telegram? Well, Telegram is an encrypted application. It allows for information to pass between users in a relatively safe and secure fashion. Now that naturally attracts people who want to do bad things. There's no doubt about that. That's not a controversial thing to say. Okay, when we talk about free speech, we get into the areas of people committing crimes. It's just the nature of the thing. Most of the communication is no doubt valid, non-criminal communication. It's just people who want to exchange information with, as much security and, more importantly, anonymity that they can. Now, again, I want to stress somewhat that I'm not suggesting that people who are using this platform to exchange criminal, obscene material, and you know what I'm talking about there. Those people are the scum of the earth, and they should be put under the jail. I'm not suggesting that they should be allowed to do that. I'm not saying that they should be free to just exchange that kind of material. What I am saying is that the French government is using that as well as what they call terrorism, quote, terrorism, and other criminal activity. They're using that as justification for cracking open those communications of everyone on the platform. I think Telegram has in the past provided information that they had when it was shown that this was specifically these specific users and this specific criminal material. I think that was in one of the articles that I read. They said they've cooperated before when it was investigating certain types of crimes, but they're not going to just give a blanket open back door for the government to just get in and read whatever they want. So the French are using this as just a justification for cracking open every single communication on that platform. Now, we know for a fact that given the level of involvement of governments, intelligence agencies, and politicians in criminal activity, specifically the kind of things that France is saying Telegram is hiding, we know that they're not really interested in getting into that communication. That's not why they want these backdoors into the platform. They want to know who's being critical of the government, who's going against the current thing, who's not going along with what the government says. They want to use this as a way to get access for all the other governments as well. If Telegram caves to France, then they'll be forced to cave to England and the United States as well. And that's really where it's at. France isn't doing this all just on its own, of its own accord. This is the U.S. pushing this in the background. Because it's also claimed that Telegram is heavily utilized by the Russian military to exchange information in a somewhat unofficial capacity. This is how a lot of informal Russian military apparently, supposedly, are communicating. So no doubt, if that is true, then NATO governments will want to see that. But do you think that's real? Do you think that's factual, or is it more likely just another canard to excuse the violation of privacy rights? I don't think that's valid. I think it's just an attack on free speech. At least you think this ends with Telegram. Maybe you don't care because you don't use Telegram. I do. I follow a number of channels over there. It's a lot of good information that gets passed there. Maybe it doesn't matter to you though because you're not on Telegram. Well, do you use X or any other platform? Do you care about the ability to communicate with a level of freedom and anonymity? If you do, then you need to be concerned about this because it's not stopping with Telegram. Elon Musk has already drawn the eye of the EU governments as well as the Dark Lord of Brazil, the Chief Justice of the Brazilian Supreme Court, who is, Jesus, this guy is a textbook villain if there ever was one. This guy looks like the illegitimate son of Nosferatu the vampire. It's really creepy. Well, he, among others, wants to go after Musk and X. Multiple agents and political actors have demanded that Elon Musk be brought to so-called justice for not censoring speech on X. It just doesn't end. So far, Musk has handled this with the same wit and trolling that he's come to be known for, but think through this in light of what France is doing. How long before the EU demands that Musk be arrested and issues a warrant for him through Interpol? Will the U.S. government refuse to act on that warrant? Will they be pressured and forced into at least arresting Musk, just like France did with the CEO of Telegram? Now, it might be going through the motions so that, a U.S. court can tell the Euros to stuff it, but that assumes that the judge would not be some kind of social justice warrior who hates Musk for buying Twitter and ruining it. And that's not a guarantee there. He's more than likely going to have to deal with a serious threat there that would have to go to the Supreme Court to get resolved. Now, I think if that happens, I think you'll be fine because I think the Supreme Court will say, look, we're not enforcing free speech laws that another country have put in place. That's not how the U.S. system works. But he's still going to have to deal with it. He's still going to have that hanging over him. And again, that assumes a Kamala victory in November. I think it's a dead issue if Trump gets elected because I think Musk is going to be in the Trump White House in some capacity. And that brings me back to RFK Jr., who's certainly a victim of this censorship that's been put into place over the last few years. And that was the other big news this week, that RFK Jr. endorses Trump last Friday after I had posted the show, so I didn't get to cover it in that episode, but I want to mention it here. I think this is a big deal. I know a lot of people don't like RFK, but a lot of independents do like him. He was seen as sort of a very viable third-party candidate. I like many of the things that he stands for. I dislike a number of the things that he stands for as well, though. I think that kind of mixed opinion of him is best resolved by RFK being in a position in the Trump White House. I think he's wanting the Secretary of HHS. I think this is the thing that is his biggest project, his life's work, if you will. If you get a chance, watch the interview that he did with Tucker Carlson. It was really informative and moving in a lot of ways. He's a very intriguing guy. I respect him a lot for his recovery and the transformation of his life. He's had a very, very troubled past, going all the way back to his childhood. It's kind of hard for a young kid to see his uncle and his father assassinated on television. Be reminded of that every time he sees those films. Especially when you know that the government had something to do with both of those. That's bound to have an impact on somebody. Kind of drive them into a bad lifestyle. I respect that he was able to step away from that edge and kind of bring himself back from that self-destructive behavior. So I think it's a big deal for Trump to get him on board, and I think it's important to have him in the cabinet in a position where he can have a really positive impact and do good, but it keeps him from enacting some of his bad ideas that are less attractive. Which, in all honesty, would be the more sort of traditional liberal or traditional Democrat kind of. I think he's still very much something like a 1960s, maybe 1970s Democrat, which is a extremely moderate, almost right-wing person at this point compared to the rest of the Democratic Party. But we'll see, who else comes out in support of Trump as we go forward. Tulsi Gabbard has also supported him and will also likely have a place in his cabinet. And again, I think that's a great move on Trump's part. And if you think this is all stupid, or if you think those are bad ideas, we shouldn't have those people in the cabinet because of their crazy ideas or what have you. Just keep in mind here that Trump has to build a broad public appeal in order to shift the narrative. That narrative has to be dragged away from the media-controlled story, the media machine. The majority of people not only have to accept that the majority of voters did vote for Trump, they have to believe that the majority of voters would vote for Trump. That's the only way to ensure that things go smoothly in November. I think you know what I mean when I say smoothly. I can't get much more into that without risking YouTube attacking this video. If you don't know, I post the video on YouTube as well as Rumble and BitChute. So there's content that I just can't get into. Ironically, we can't talk in a video about free speech and the attack on free speech. There are certain things that we can't talk about because the algorithm will attack that free speech. Anyway, that is all I have time for this week. Like and subscribe. Come see us over on Gab, Nice Crew, and the Cold Fury blog. And I will see you on the next episode.